What do you say, everybody? With Andrew Bone, I'm Mick Gillespie. It's great to have you here on Bama Insider and the Bama Insider YouTube channel, where you have made us a smash hit. And I mean all of us, not just Bone and I mean you guys as well. Over 52,000 subscribers and growing. Make sure that you give us a thumbs up and subscribe as you watch our show today. Andrew Bone is our recruiting expert on the Alabama Rivals site. He's been at it for many, many years, even though he looks like a spring chicken. This guy's been going for a long time, and it's always great to talk to my main man, Andrew Bone. How's it going, man?
It's great, Mick. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing well. I feel the incoming 8A game. There's a lot of excitement around Alabama football coming off of a #1 recruiting class. I can't wait to watch this year's game just to get an idea of what the new players are going to look like in an Alabama uniform, what's, the quarterback spot's going to be like with Bryce Young. And here we are in the process of reloading again. As we talk about the upcoming class for Alabama, let's stick with the defensive side of the football, where Alabama's done really well.
Yeah, they certainly have. I mean, obviously, the last couple recruiting classes, Alabama has really loaded up on the defensive side of the ball, specifically at outside linebacker. And, we saw, an outstanding group of outside linebackers in, the previous two recruiting classes. And I don't know if they're going to really load up at outside linebacker in this class. There's still a few guys that they're going after. We'll mention some of them here in a minute. I think the linebacker class overall is numbers are probably going to be a little bit smaller than what we've seen in the last two recruiting classes, but defensive line, defensive back still remain top priority positions, and still positions that Alabama is going to continue to heavily recruit. And I think they're going to try to sign several players at both of those spots.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, you talk about the defensive side of the ball. Is that what you feel like the biggest need spot is right now for Alabama?
Well, I think there's needs on both sides of the football, but you look at on the defensive line. I certainly think that defensive tackle, defensive end, probably defensive end, probably a little bit more than defensive tackle. Can Alabama, find an elite defensive end in this class? That can come in and make a tremendous impact. Obviously, they're still recruiting JT Tuimoloau, the 5-star defensive lineman in the 2021 class. For those who are wondering, no decision yet. Just wait until the summer when he starts taking these official visits, which includes a trip to Alabama. So after that visit, we'll know a little bit more about JT. And maybe if JT jumps on board, it's not as much of a priority in the 2022 class. You still want to get a couple guys at the position, but I think with if they can get JT Tuimoloau on board, they're going to be pretty excited, pretty stoked about the future of the position. I think defensive back wise, Alabama really loaded up at defensive back last year. I think 6 overall defensive backs, but despite the high numbers, still going to be a top priority position. There's several guys who are out there that we'll talk about here in a minute, but I certainly think they're Alabama's still trying to sign 5. I don't know if they're going to get to 6, but I would say at least 4, probably 5 defensive backs in this year's recruiting class.
Well, for Alabama, the way that they were able to pull in the haul last year, if they were to add another linebacker and what is he, like the #1 defensive player in the country already to this class? I mean, would that be the greatest class ever assembled? I mean, isn't it already kind of there?
On JT Tuimoloau?
Yes.
I mean, it's a pretty spectacular, recruiting class. I mean, at every single position. I mean, they have studs at every single position in this class, and a lot of those guys are already on campus. So they add one more, and if it's a 5-star and JT Tuimoloau, I mean, it's certainly going to be one that a lot of people are going to be watching and evaluating over the course of the next few years. Is it can it be one of the best classes of all time? On the defense side of the ball, not just on offense. I think that this defensive class is certainly extremely special, and you're going to see a lot of big time players come out of this class here in the next couple of years.
Let's talk about a couple of those guys. Let's start with Robert Woodyard, 4-star commitment to Alabama, made that commitment in June of last year. So he's been there for a while. This is a guy that Alabama is really excited about having.
Yeah, Alabama has 5 commitments right now, 2 on the defensive side of the ball. Robert Woodyard committed to Alabama. Back during the summer, committed. He missed most of his freshman season, missed most of his sophomore season due to injuries, but now fully back to 100%. Had a great junior season, and committed to Alabama. Alabama liked him enough to take a commitment from him before he was back to 100% health. And they really like this kid a lot. This is a guy that can play inside or outside linebacker, moves really well for his size. Has been competing in 7-on-7 camps already this spring, and definitely a tremendous athlete. Works a little bit on the offensive side of the ball sometimes, but this is definitely a defensive player in college, and I know that there's some other schools that are still recruiting him, but he committed to Alabama early for a reason. He's pretty solid with that decision.
Yeah, I mean, and they got to him pretty early. Let's talk about another guy who's already committed. It's not like Alabama has a huge class right now of committed defensive players, but the other guy that's on there is a big defensive end named Walter Bob. From Louisiana. Nick Saban always seems to be able to go into Louisiana and get these big defenders.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a surprise commitment when he announced for Alabama, a few months ago, just a couple of days before my birthday. I think that's on February the 1st there. So he was committed the week of National Signing Day on that Monday. So a little bit of a surprise commitment. It's about 6'4", about 250 pounds, but he had a great junior season. Really started to generate a lot of interest. Alabama was one of the first kind of big schools to extend him an offer, and I think it was maybe 1 or 2 days after his commitment to Alabama, he picked up an offer from Florida. So a lot of schools extremely interested in him. I'm interested to kind of see how much he's going to develop over the course of the next couple of years. Is he potentially going to be a defensive end? Is he going to could he possibly grow into a defensive tackle? I remember a few years ago, a guy by the name of Jonathan Allen, when he first committed to Alabama, he was 6'3", about 240 pounds, and we saw him grow all the way into a monster defensive tackle at Alabama, and obviously having a tremendous amount of success with the Washington football team. So I'm interested to see kind of how Walter Bob develops. And I think he's most likely going to be a defensive end, and I think Alabama is extremely excited about it. He still has some things to kind of work on off the field, but as long as he can get those things in order, I think he certainly can be an excellent player down the road.
A lot of pressure when you're from Louisiana and you commit to Alabama as a top recruit. But, since Nick Saban's come to Tuscaloosa, he's done really well in that state. Why is that?
Well, I think he understands that state extremely well. He recruited it for a long time when he was the head coach at LSU. He knew the amount of talent that's in that state. And, obviously, a lot of great high school football programs, a lot of great high school football coaches. And, I think when Nick Saban first arrived in Tuscaloosa, it was one of the first places he went to was Louisiana. He even flipped Luther Davis, who was committed to LSU. He was a U.S. Army All-American. Flipped him within just a couple weeks of being, the head coach at Alabama. So, he wasn't going to back down from LSU. I mean, that's a tough state to recruit in because of the success of the LSU program. And, a lot of kids in Louisiana grew up as LSU fans. There weren't two schools in Louisiana. There wasn't an Auburn in Louisiana. So you didn't really have anybody that you were, really competing against. LSU was the team that most of these kids growing up in the New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Shreveport areas, really throughout the entire state, they grew up LSU fans. But Nick Saban, Alabama, they have, despite the loss to LSU, a year ago, in Tuscaloosa, they have really dominated that series for the most part. And so a lot of these kids growing up, they've been watching Alabama dominate LSU and have a lot of success. And these kids, especially kids from Louisiana who have gone to Alabama, who've had a lot of success. So, I certainly think all those aspects help the Crimson Tide when it comes to recruiting in that state, plus the relationships. I mean, you don't have to go to LSU. You can go out of state and still have a lot of success and still be welcome back in your home state. You may not be welcome back your first year, but I think after that, most of them tend to forget about it. And I think Alabama does recruits the state of Louisiana just as well as anybody in the country.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. We really appreciate having all of you with us here on Bama Insider and the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Thumbs up and subscribe. And for those of you that are listening to this right now, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, the easiest way to say Roll Tide is by giving us a 5-star rating. We're the Alabama rival site, and we're getting you ready as we talk recruiting with Andrew Bone for the next recruiting class. So you got to remember, December's going to get here quickly, and you're going to want to know how Alabama got to where they got to last year, which was number one of all the recruiting classes, something that Nick Saban has made a habit of doing. All right, let's talk about targets for that recruiting class, Bone, and players that Alabama would really like to have. And let's start with another big defender, a guy named Walter Nolen. He would be a 5-star, someone that Alabama would love to have.
Absolutely. We've talked about Walter Nolen before, number one defensive lineman in the country. And, this is a kid that, just put out a top 8, has Alabama in it. There's some heavy hitters in there, some schools that he really, likes a lot, that he's going to take visits to, that he's going to enjoy the recruiting process. I think in the end, probably going to be an Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Georgia, the recruiting battle. Those are kind of the top schools on his list. And he's going to take a lot of visits this summer. I think, what people need to understand, what Alabama fans need to understand is, most of these kids, and we say this every single week, but most of these kids have not been seen by the Alabama coaching staff. They haven't had a chance to sit down with the coaches in person and really get to know them. Obviously, they've had these Zoom calls. They've, talked to them on the phone. They're, on social media, they're interacting with them on Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. But in terms of, actually sitting down with these coaches and getting a chance to know them and having their parents sit down with these coaches and meet with academic support staff and, tour the campus and see where they would be living if they did decide to go to Alabama, and meet with, Jeff Allen and the training staff, and, meet with the strength and conditioning staff, meet with those guys and really get to know them, really well. That's going to be really important for a lot of these guys this summer, especially these top end guys who are wanted by every single program in the country, and Walter Nolen is certainly one of them. And he's a guy that really likes Alabama early on in the process. I don't see any way that Alabama's not in this thing until the very end. I think they're going to be a top contender for him. All the way until he gets ready to make that decision. There's some other guys that are out there too, especially in state. I think, Khurtiss Perry from Park Crossing High School in Montgomery, Justice Finkley from Hewitt-Trussville. These are two guys who are both in-state kids who have visited Alabama in the past, but at the same time, they haven't really gone out and seen a lot of different schools. They want to go out and visit these other programs. They don't want to rush in a decision. They want to, make sure, they're evaluating these programs from top to bottom. And, I can't blame them for doing that at all, especially, when it's been a year since recruits have really been able to go onto college campuses and see different schools. But those are two, really big in-state targets for Alabama on the defensive front. Marquise Graciel out of Missouri, another kid that Alabama has been recruiting for a long time. Travis Shaw is a 5-star defensive lineman from Greensboro, North Carolina. Now, Travis Shaw didn't include Alabama in his top. I think he put out a top 13 back in the fall. Didn't include Alabama in it, but in a recent story, I think it was posted just a couple of days ago on Rivals, he said that he plans on visiting Alabama this summer. Still think Alabama probably a long shot there, but with him saying he's going to visit Alabama, at least, is at least giving Alabama a chance. And, that's all they can ask for. They want to get these kids on campus because, when you get on campus, you really see these schools in a different light. And, all the things that Alabama, has to offer, all the bells and whistles, I think, going to be really impressed with. I think what they're going to be most impressed with is when they really sit down with these coaches, when they sit down with these, coaches who have sent so many players off into the NFL or, graduated all these players, or, these guys are also going to be looking at academics, who's going to be able to sell their program academically as well. It's not just a football program. These parents are going to come in, enjoy the visits, but they're also going to say, they're also going to be asking them the question, how are you going to take care of my son? I want to make sure that my kid, when he goes to your school, whether that's kid coming from California or whether it's kid coming in from Birmingham, I want to make sure that my kid's taken care of in terms of, I don't want him to be getting into trouble. I want to make sure that, he's developing himself both on and off the field. And I think Alabama does a great job of, really selling that. And, Nick Saban, really kind of a father figure to a lot of these guys. And I think a lot, big reason why a lot of these kids end up going to Alabama is because they know that they're going to be, well taken care of.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Love talking to you here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, or whether you're listening on our Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're watching. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening right now. And don't forget that you can catch up with Bone anytime you want at BamaInsider.com, where he posts all the latest on recruiting for the Crimson Tide. A lot of big-time defenders are still available. Not a lot of players are committed at this point, but starting to get there. Let's talk linebackers with Alabama. Who do you think will be the Crimson Tide's top linebacker targets?
Well, there's several guys who are already out there. Alabama already has one linebacker commitment in Robert Woodyard. So, I don't think it's going to be a really deep, big linebacker class for Alabama this year, but they're still going after some, obviously some big name guys. You look at a guy like Enai White out of Philadelphia, kid who's 6'5", about 230 pounds. That's a pretty good. I think you. The wrong linebacker right there, but that's
wrong guy.
We're looking at Enai White, Enai Enai White. So I think that's certainly somebody that we're paying pretty close attention to. He's the one. There you go. So if Alabama fans remember when the video came out a few months ago of Coach Saban having the video conference with a recruit that went viral. Well, this is the guy that the conversation was with. Now, it wasn't his fault. I think that one of his assistant coaches may have posted the video, but regardless, he remains one of Alabama's top targets and plans on visiting Alabama in the summer, in June. So this is certainly somebody that we're watching pretty closely. Sean Murphy, who's a 5-star linebacker, has Alabama in his top. I think he has a top 8 right now. I would be sort of surprised if Sean Murphy ended up at Alabama, but I've just seen so many times, kids in the spring, they may not have Alabama in their top 2, top 3. They may have them in their top overall group, but then they end up visiting or they continue to spend, a lot of time, talking to the coaches. Things change throughout the summer, throughout the fall. So he's certainly somebody that we're going to continue to watch. Harold Perkins, out of Texas, another big-time out-of-state kid that Alabama has been heavily recruiting for a long time. I certainly expect him to visit Alabama this summer. Then, a couple in-state guys that Alabama obviously has continued to push for. Jeremiah Alexander, number 1 player in the state of Alabama, from Thompson High School, was originally a commitment to Alabama, but backed off that decision. A lot of people thought he was going to commit to Georgia, but has not made a decision, has held off. And I think that's a good thing for Alabama. If he were to pick today, I'd probably still lean Georgia, but I don't think he's going to be announcing anytime soon. I think he wants to take these trips. This is a kid who, grew up only about 45 minutes away from Tuscaloosa. He grew up an Alabama fan. Obviously he likes Georgia a lot, and strongly considering, both programs. So he's certainly somebody that, I think Alabama, still pressing for, still would like to keep in state. Shamar James out of down in Mobile at Faith Academy down in Mobile. I was about to say, for some reason, I was about to say St. Paul's, but got tongue tied a little bit. But yeah, he's at Faith Academy down in Mobile. 6'3", 210 pounds. Plays on both sides of the football, but mainly being recruited as an outside linebacker, and certainly somebody that I think Alabama has been pushing for. They really like, and I do not expect them to turn him away if he wants to jump on board. So we're watching Shamar James very closely. Been watching him pretty closely this spring to see if a decision may happen. But as we all know, visits are going to start happening again on June the 1st. Kids are trying to go to as many schools as possible because they haven't really visited. They haven't seen anybody. So I think that's kind of the reason why a lot of these kids holding out before making their decision. One more in-state guy, T.J. Dudley out of Montgomery Catholic. A lot of people thought that he was going to commit during the spring. And we've been saying on our show for a while, give him a little bit of time. I think Alabama, with this being a smaller linebacker class, Alabama wants to make sure they're making the right decisions. They want to evaluate kids. They want to bring them on campus. They want to size them up. They'll make sure they're getting on accurate height and weight. They may also want to work them out a little bit. So T.J. Dudley is probably one of those guys that they want to see just a little bit more, before they really, kind of go all in on him. But, he's certainly somebody that I can see in Alabama's class as long as, he ends up making a trip to Tuscaloosa, working out. We've seen so many kids like that, so many All-Americans, that may have just had to wait a little bit longer. And I think I mentioned this a week or two ago, Quinnen Williams. He had a lot of early offers, and obviously he was a big-time player. But Alabama, wanted to see. They had not seen him in person. They wanted to wait to see him in person. They saw him during the spring a little bit. That's great. It's just one of the assistant coaches who's seen him. Coach Saban wants to see these guys in person. So Quinnen committed to Auburn early on. I think it was like February or March. Committed to Auburn. Nick Saban finally had a chance to see him that summer. I think it was the first or second week of June. He instantly became one of Alabama's top targets. So it's nothing against the kid. I think a lot of people take it in a negative light sometimes. Oh, he's not a commitment, or excuse me, he's not a take for Alabama at this point. It's not because they're not good enough. It's because coaches want to see him. And I try to really stress that. Nick Saban, best coach in college football, maybe best coach of all time, 7 national championships. He can wait to see these kids a little bit more, and that's what obviously makes Alabama so good, is they like to properly evaluate kids. They want to see them in person. They don't want to just take, every kid that they think has a 5-star highlight film. They want to see how they work in person. They want to see, are they coachable? They want to sit down with them and get to know them a little bit more, from a personal standpoint, not just from, a virtual standpoint. So got to give them a little bit of time. And then, once these kids come on campus, and then you start seeing, the full court press, whether that's, a kid who's been rated a 5-star from day one, or if that's a, 3-star kid that may have had, 3 offers before they showed up in Tuscaloosa. So let these kids get evaluated, properly. And then, then you really kind of get a chance to know who is the top target on Alabama's recruiting board.
He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie, talking recruiting here with you on Bama Insider and BamaInsider.com. Thumbs up and subscribe as you hang out with us. And don't forget, check out the site. It's a great time to become a member right now to BamaInsider.com for all of the latest on recruiting or anything Alabama, whether it be football, basketball, or any sport that has anything going. And right now, it just seems like every time you turn around, Alabama sports are doing really well. Let's talk about this recruiting class. Defensive backs. Alabama does not have one yet, but that's Nick Saban's specialty, and I know they have some big-time targets in their sights.
The good thing about Alabama, and I remember saying this last year, none of Alabama's targets have committed. So that's a good thing. If you looked at Alabama's defensive backboard and saw 5 of their top 10 commitments committed already elsewhere, you got to worry a little bit because you're only working on you got 5 more targets out there. You're hoping to get 3 or 4 of them, and it's going to be hard to do. But you look at Alabama's DB board this year, and I think really one of the only guys who, off the top of my head, has committed elsewhere that they really liked a lot. I didn't think they were going to get him, but they really liked Malachi Starks a lot out of Georgia, out of Jefferson, Georgia, who committed to Georgia a couple of weeks ago. Even though it looked more like a Georgia-Clemson recruiting battle, they still really like this Malachi Starks a lot. But same time, there's still a lot of guys who are out there that they're heavily recruiting that they really like, including Denver Harris, 5-star cornerback out of North Shore High School in Houston, Texas. Alabama, can they make it 3 years in a row where they've signed someone from North Shore High School? And he's certainly somebody that they would love to add. Signed, Damian George 2 years ago, signed Jaden Roberts last year. Now they're going after Denver Harris. So, I certainly think that Alabama has a great chance with him. They're in his top 4. I think they're probably in the lead. It's Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M. But this is certainly somebody that I feel like Alabama has an excellent chance to land in this class. And I think he's going to be making an official visit late June to Alabama, and probably going to be making a decision before the end of the summer. He's really not the only 5-star that Alabama is going after. Another 5-star is Damani Jackson, 5-star safety. I think he's rated as a corner, but in my opinion, I think he can play really either or. But he's committed to USC. I think there's a really good chance that he's going to make a trip to Alabama. He grew up a USC fan. Lives on the West Coast, so it's going to be pretty tough probably to flip him. But I think there's some strong interest there from Damani Jackson, to Alabama. So we're going to continue to watch him. Same high school where Bryce Young played, and Alabama certainly been pushing hard. We had Earl Little Jr. On our recruiting show on Tuesday. Great interview with Earl Little Jr. out of American Heritage High School down in Plantation, same high school that sent Patrick Surtain Jr. to Alabama. So that certainly has been a key area where Alabama's recruited the last few years, and Earl Little certainly a guy that Alabama's been pressing for. He's going to make a trip up to Alabama in June. I think it's June the 18th. Already has his official visit set for Alabama in November when the Tide host LSU. So there is very strong interest in Alabama. Now you look at his forecast right now; it's 100% to Miami. We can just go ahead and say it's not going to be Miami. As of right now, it's not Miami. I think there's 2 predictions on there for the Hurricanes, and it came a while back. But he says Miami not even in his top 5 right now. His father played there, but Miami not in his top 5. It's Alabama, Florida State, LSU. Missing one other school. I can't think of it right now, but I'll give you 4. But I certainly think that Alabama. USC. He's visiting USC in June. Going to take all those other visits in the fall. But I think Alabama's got a great chance with Earl Little, Devin Moore. Another really talented defensive back out of Naples, Florida. I think he's only rated as a 3-star, but this is a kid that's right at the top of Alabama's DB board. They've certainly been pressing hard for him for a while. Azariah Thomas, DB out of Niceville, Florida. Jake Pope, safety out of Buford, Georgia. And Terrence Brooks out of Texas. These are all some of Alabama's premier defensive back targets. One other defensive back that I really like a lot, but I'm interested to kind of see what he's going to do here in the future is Antonio Kite out of Anniston High School. Very talented basketball player. Just came off a state championship, played 1 season of high school football and picked up a lot of offers, including one from Alabama. Is he going to end up sticking to basketball, or is he going to play football? I don't think that decision has been made yet. He's got a lot of offers already in football, but still trying to decide what's going to be the best thing for him and his future. And obviously, he's rated pretty high in football, but from what I've gathered so far, hasn't made that decision just yet. But he's certainly somebody that Alabama likes a lot. That they're pushing hard for, and if he does decide to make that decision to play football, I like Alabama's chances.
Could he possibly do the same thing that Kool-Aid is considering, and that's play both sports?
I think he'd like to. I've said this. I said this during Kool-Aid's recruitment and Terran Arnold's recruitment. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to play both sports for two top 10 programs. Top 10 program in basketball and a top 10 program in football. The amount of dedication and work that you have to put in, to play at that level, especially to play two sports that overlap each other, especially with a program like Alabama, who's going to typically be playing in January. It's pretty tough. So we'll see. I think he'd like to do that, but at the same time, pretty tough to do.
Well, there's a look at recruiting right now as we move forward. Anything else before we bid everyone farewell today, Bone?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think a lot of people, even though it's only April, and last year we were in April, there was only one commitment, so it's a little bit better this year. I think Alabama fans, for the most part, the ones who follow recruiting, I think they understand that this has been, this is a little bit of a different year, just because so many kids haven't been evaluated. And we're finally going to see kids on campus again. These kids are really excited. Everybody I've talked to just really pumped about finally being able to go, not just to Alabama, but, all these other programs that they haven't seen before, especially kids in state. A lot of in-state kids have been able to go to Alabama or Auburn. They haven't been able to venture out, or a kid from California who wants to visit Alabama before they make that decision. I'm just glad that things are starting to, seems to be getting back to normal, at least on the recruiting front. And we're finally going to see kids on campus. We're going to see kids work out and see kids take official visits. I cannot believe we went an entire recruiting cycle in 2021 without seeing a single kid take an official visit. And still, Alabama had obviously a tremendous amount of success. Let's see what happens this year with official visits finally back on the board.
Yeah, well, it's good to see things starting to get back to normal again, and the light at the end of the tunnel as far as COVID-19 and the restrictions and everything else. He's Andrew Bone. I'm Mick Gillespie. Don't forget, subscribe to our station here on YouTube, the Bama Insider YouTube channel. We love having you guys here. And every single day, Kyle Henderson, our managing editor, Tony Sukalis, our beat writer, Andrew Bone, who follows recruiting, and me, Mick Gillespie, try to provide you with the latest content on the Crimson Tide. And we love the fact that you guys are here hanging out. Also, if you're listening to the podcast right now, 5-star. That's the best way that you could say Roll Tide to us as we talk about the next wave of Alabama recruiting. And, what's the saying that Alabama doesn't rebuild, they reload? Well, Andrew Bone's the guy that tells you how to do that each and every day on BamaInsider.com. Thanks for watching, guys. Roll Tide.